Now we're going to hear from the book of Matthew, Matthew 9, the New Revised Standard Version that's updated. While he was saying these things to them, suddenly a leader came in and knelt before him, saying, "My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her and she will live." And Jesus got up and followed him with his disciples. Then suddenly a woman who'd been suffering from a flow of blood for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. For she was saying to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be made well." Jesus turned and seeing her, he said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well." And the woman was made well from that moment. When Jesus came to the leader's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, "Go away, for the girl is not dead, but just sleeping." And they laughed at him. But when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl got up. And the report of this spread throughout all of that district. The word of the Lord. As some of you know, Ralph and I were in Seattle last week at a family wedding. And at the wedding, I had an opportunity to have a conversation with a young church leader. And I asked him what parts of his job he loved the most. "The people," he said. "I love young people and their creativity and the way we encourage them to find their own voices. And also," he added, "our mission trips aren't in South America or in the Appalachian Mountains. Instead, they're on the local Native American reservations here in Washington." Well, I asked why was that important. He replied, "The kids got to see the needs, what the needs were in their local area firsthand, right there, and then build relationships with those people in need. And then from those experiences and relationships, they learn how to advocate for the needs of those people. And the kids really grow in these involvements. Prayer and finding their own sense of self and God seemed to be an important part of what they did as well." After we'd finished talking, I thought to myself, if we help young people know their own voices as an advocate for themselves, then they'll know how to advocate for others, relying on God for our place in the kingdom family, a child of God, and then using that confidence and courage to help others. It sounded like he was onto something really important with that youth group. In the book of Matthew, the author uses a technique in his writing called intercalation. It means to sandwich one story inside of another story. In the passage we heard today, Matthew tells us about two women, one young, one older, one from a prominent household, the other unnamed and possibly marginalized. Both are in crisis, yet both encounter Jesus. And in him, they don't find dismissal or rejection, but healing and life. In our world today, people often feel voiceless, whether because of illness or poverty or age or injustice. And this passage shows Jesus standing up for two very different people, yet with comparisons that might surprise us. So the author of Matthew would have sandwiched these two stories together because they had so many similarities. Listen to them. The daughter of the leader, by the way, is most likely Jairus, that's probably the leader's name, was 12 years old, and she was a daughter. The hemorrhaging woman bled for 12 years, referred to as a daughter from God. Both healings were of women. Both healings required either self-advocacy or parent advocacy. That's a lot of common ground. So I can see why they were sandwiched together. Now, I want you to imagine right now in your heads, Jesus sitting down, teaching a group of followers with his disciples. Okay, can you imagine that? Okay, he's sitting down, okay? So is Jesus sitting cross-legged or his legs out straight? What do you think? Cross-legged? Okay. Is Jesus on a blanket or on the ground? What do you think? Think a blanket? Bare ground? We don't know, right? But just think about it in your head. Now, so imagine this. I want you to picture this in your mind. Now I want you to imagine that when he's teaching, sitting down, a leader, a prominent person in the faith community comes to him and kneels before him. What does kneeling before someone usually mean? Call it out. What does it usually mean? Submission. Deference. Respect. Anything else?
You have to feel safe.
Safe. True. Hadn't thought of that. Anything else? I want your attention. I'm subservient to you. I honor you. I respect you. I hear you. I want to know you. Any of those things, right? When the leader speaks to Jesus, he says this, my daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her and she will live. The verb tense here in the Greek is in the imperative. And what does that mean? It means that Jesus is being implored to come to his daughter. And the language is that of a command. Lay your hand on her. Do it, Jesus, and she'll live. It's a command language. So if the leader were on his knees in front of Jesus in a worshiping posture, a knee bent to the divine out of respect, why then would he try and command Jesus to come and lay a hand on his daughter? He wasn't paying homage. He was imploring. When Ralph was stung by a fire ant a few years ago, within 10 minutes of the bite, he had symptoms of anaphylaxis. Now, I drove him quickly to a medical clinic because I knew we could not wait for an ambulance. There's no way. So when we got to the clinic, I raced him in the door of the walk-in clinic, and he was trying to pass out, which often happens in anaphylaxis, and I yelled, anaphylaxis, we need help now. And the doctor came in and tries to see what's going on, and I gave her a 2-second overview. Ant bite, anaphylaxis, he's violently allergic. And then I said to the doctor in charge of the facility, he needs an EpiPen now. She just wasn't taking the situation very seriously, not enough. She wasn't moving quickly, and I knew Ralph. Therefore, I knew he was in serious trouble. I was the one left to advocate for my husband. I had to advocate. This father is demanding action from Jesus as he was the one advocating for his 12-year-old, and he was desperate. So yes, he was demanding that Jesus get up and go lay hands on her. And I might have done the same if I encountered the living Lord and my child was near death or had already died, right? And friends, the interesting part of this is Jesus does not take offense at all. At all. Did you notice that? He doesn't. Instead, he just gets up off the ground, he stopped teaching, and he followed the man to his home with the disciples trailing behind. But while they're racing to this leader's home, they were interrupted. Then suddenly, a woman who had been suffering from a flow of blood for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. So this woman interrupts their rapid attempt to get to the young girl's bedside with her own agenda and her own narrative. So the two stories are now sandwiched. The dead girl had her father to advocate for her, but the hemorrhaging woman had no one but herself. She goes directly to the source of the possible healing, just like the father did. She must have been very, very courageous. She knows maybe that he can heal even from a distance. She could have heard that. She might have even heard the conversation about them racing to the bedside of the girl. Yet her own needs must have felt just as important as the father's needs. And talk about courage. If she knows that Jesus can heal with just a touch, then she might also be under the assumption that he can also curse by just a touch. This is not the 21st century. These types of beliefs were very real. So yes, she was quite courageous. This woman had suffered for 12 years and decided enough was enough, and she was going to get health care. She's going to get health care. She's going to touch the fringe of Jesus' cloak and hope to be healed. Let's talk just a moment about the woman's physical state and how that left her according to Jewish law. Because she's bleeding, she's deemed impure. There are ritual purity laws related to a woman's menstrual cycle and to giving birth that would affect this woman's daily life. She's not allowed to touch her husband or a male while she's bleeding. She's not allowed to go into the temple while she's bleeding. But she can touch her children. She can do household chores. She can go shopping. She can make pottery. Purity issues only become a factor in interpersonal relations with a man or in entering the temple. Therefore, the woman has not broken any laws. She only touched the fringe of Jesus' cloak. And neither has Jesus broken any laws because he did not touch her. Now, we have a tendency to think of this woman as completely marginalized and living alone on the outskirts, full of shame. But what if she had woman family members and woman neighbors that cared for her when she was too weak to do her tasks? That was allowed, in fact, even part of Jewish law. What if her main issue wasn't purity laws and shame, but anemia? She'd been bleeding for 12 years. As the woman touches the fringe of his garment, she thinks in her head, if I only can touch his cloak, I will be made well. The text doesn't say the woman thinks in her head, if only I touch his cloak, I'll be returned to my community. I'll be restored to a righteous life instead of my shameful life. No, she says made well. If I only touch his cloak, I will be made well. To bleed for 12 years isn't right. It isn't normal. She must have been physically exhausted. Now, in the other gospel accounts, things unfold differently. The way the story is told varies from gospel to gospel. But in Matthew, the text says, Jesus turned, and seeing her, he said, take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well. Ada Levine, who writes our series, says that the phrase take heart isn't strong enough to match the original Aramaic. It really is closer to meaning this: be courageous and confident, daughter, do not be afraid. Sounds different, doesn't it? Jesus has her back. Let's return to the little girl, the daughter of the leader. After healing the bleeding woman with the phrase, take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well, the leader continues on to his house with Jesus. There's a commotion outside when they arrive, as there were professional mourners there. You can hire people to come in and mourn. And they had already started. When Jesus came to the leader's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, go away, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping. When I was a doula and assisted moms in birthing labor, I often had to send away well-meaning people, often the parents of the woman giving birth, because they'd come and camp out. And they're trying to get into the birthing room so they could be part of the experience. But sometimes the birthing mother didn't want the parents in the room, particularly their fathers. It just felt uncomfortable to them. So I had to tell them to go sit somewhere else, and we'll call you when it's over. I often had to act sort of as the parent to the birthing couple instead of their own parents, protecting them from the ones that loved them, but sometimes got in the way. In both healings, Jesus acts as a father would, caring for the women in his family, healing one sickness and protecting another from a crowd that's mourning her, not letting them know that she is dead, and then saving her. When the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl got up. In the original language, it reads more like this. When the crowd had been cast out, he went in and took her by the hand and raised her up. It's a bit stronger, isn't it? It mimics the resurrection, what is to come. In this story, two people approach Jesus from very different positions. A synagogue leader, well-respected, influential. The leader's daughter is dead. To the world and even to hired mourners, her story is over. But Jesus takes her hand and restores her life. Her identity is no longer the little girl who died, but the girl who lives because of Jesus. And her father turned to God himself for her healing. As children of God, we are not defined by what feels dead in us, our past, our failures, our hopelessness. In Christ, we are made alive. Then when we have a woman with a bleeding condition, perhaps she's isolated, she's certainly exhausted, she's sick, she's desperate for healing, and she turns to Jesus herself. She risks everything by touching Jesus, and instead of rejection, Jesus turns and says, take heart, daughter. As children of God, we are not invisible. We are not defined by our illnesses or bad things that have happened to us. God sees us and God embraces us when we have the faith to trust in him. A little boy went to his first day of school. And his mom had written his name on a bright sticker and placed it on his shirt so the teacher would know who he was. But during recess, the tag fell off. And when it was time to line up, the boy began to cry. The teacher knelt down and asked, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "I don't know who I am anymore. My name tag is gone." The teacher gently smiled and pulled him close and said, "You don't need a tag to know who you are. I know your name, and so do your parents. You are still you." The woman with the bleeding problem and the ruler's daughter both seemed to have lost their name tags. One was labeled sick and unclean. The other was labeled dead and hopeless. But Jesus restored their true identity, not by a sticker or by society's labels, but by his word and his touch. How do we as children of God turn to God for our sense of self, for our sense of value, for our confidence? As children of God, we don't have to cling to the shifting labels the world gives us. God still knows our name. We are his beloved children. And knowing this gives us the courage to advocate for ourselves with God, to approach God with our needs and our desires of the heart. The Father did this, and so did the bleeding woman. And just like the kids in the state of Washington learned on that Native American reservation, they found themselves and God while discovering the needs of others. And once we figure it all out, we can share this with our neighbors, helping people to rely on God when they need help, support, or comfort, and to rely on each other for family. Friends, we're just children of God trying to do our best, but we need to trust in Jesus and not put him as our last resort, our last thought. Jesus needs to be our first call. Amen.